Hello there everybody, this is Graham, also known as Collector 75, and welcome back to part 11 of my Transformers G1 Marvel UK Transformers Comics reviews. Now then, as you can see, we're starting at issue number 101, we're working our way up to number 112, I believe, something like that. Right, let's start. As you can see, it's a nice cover there with Galvatron on it, because this is the return of Galvatron. He's going to be a mainstay now in the comic until around issue 205 or so. So there we go, move on to the front cover. We've got a nice little transformation page, nice picture of Galvatron there. You've got the Ready Break winners and Action Force Carry On or something like that. So I think it's because they're going to be starring in their own comic. Anyway, this story is called Fallen Angel, and it's basically just the return of Galvatron. As we can see, Skids is leading the Autobots that were captured by Rat and Circuit Breaker back to the Ark, because obviously he's the only one who knows where it is. Now then, as you can see, a bit like Optimus Prime back in issue 78, he disappears into limbo. The reason they chose Skids is because the American comic wasn't going to use Skids anymore, so they could just use this to throwaway character, so they could just get rid of. So there we go, he's disappeared. And here is Centurion. Last saw back in about issue number 77, I think. Still controlled by Professor Morris. He's gone to investigate this sort of like fallen star. As you can see, it's just a big hole in the ground. He looks in and he finds Galvatron. How Galvatron got there, we're going to find out in a minute, just after he decides to completely dispatch with Centurion in this nice little bout. Unfortunately, it was actually miscoloured throughout this two-page spread here, which is a bit annoying because it was some glorious artwork by Jeff Sr. As you can see, he just rips his head off there. And then he just remembers what's happened, because with the planet fall, he actually thought that Centurion was Rodimus Prime. But now he's remembering what happened at the end of Transformers the movie, where he got thrown out of Unicron by Rodimus Prime. But then he still kept the time travel mechanism trigger, and it sent him back to the year 1987. Well, it'll be 87 now, I believe. And so then he's sort of like gathering his thoughts and that. And it says he was disorientated and he took that lumbering mechanite for him. And at the end he just says, well, no great loss. And as you can see, the head falls on the ground, but it's picked up by someone who's not very happy. Now then we have the other Autobots wondering what's happened to Skids. And then, of course, the Autobots run into Galvatron. And there he is. So they decided to try and just fire a few warning shots at him to try and scare him off. Also, the current Earthbound Decepticons notice the explosions. And the Autobots don't fare too well against Galvatron at all, as you can imagine. But Blaster manages to use his sonic, sort of locks onto his brainwaves or something, tries to fry his circuits. And it strips away his sanity, leaving only the madness. And then he believes that that was Rodimus Prime again, because he's gone a bit nuts again. And then the head of Centurion gets thrown in front of Galvatron, and he says, huh, who? And then, of course, it's the Dinobots. And now, so the next issue is going to be Galvatron against the Dinobots. And of course we have Grimgrams, and there is the A to Z that I was talking about in the last part. This is actually quite a newish comic, because I re-got this one. I did tear that one out, my old one. So that's what the A to Z looks like. We've got Blaster and Blast Off there. And just more Action Force in the next issue, and Robo-Capers by Lou Stringer even. So there we go, that was issue number 101, February 1987. Move on to issue number 102. Let me try and straighten out there. There we go, nice little cover with Galvatron on the front there, with the three of the Dinobots. Unfortunately, this issue was drawn by I can't remember his name now. Is it Jeff somebody? I'll tell you in 1 second. Jeff Anderson. I never really liked his artwork, unfortunately. I remember he did email me once, I believe, saying that he was putting some of his artwork for sale, and I wasn't really interested in it. It was okay, but just nowhere near the dynamic standards of Jeff Sr. and a few other people. But this issue just concentrates now on Galvatron taking on the Dinobots. He manages to do best nearly all of them until Blaster fries his circuits again. There we go, and then he just picks up this sword and says, now Rodimus Prime, you die. And he throws the sword straight up Blaster. But he is carried off by Swoop just in time. It's a nice little advert there for Marmite. And now allowing the Dinobots to attack. And now, of course, Shockwave turns up with all the rest of the Decepticons. They say that, well, best aid the Dinobots here, because Galvatron is a threat to his superiority, so the Dinobots carry on. Eventually, Galvatron just throws blaster at them and finishes them off. He hits Swoop with a blast, knocking him out. But Professor Morris, because he once did take control of Swoop before, of course, says he can help Swoop defeat Galvatron. Blah, 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 on that, because Galvatron's just still beating up with Dinobots. And there we go. So Professor Morris takes control of him and attacks him long enough for the Earthbound Decepticons to come along and aid them. And he says, Rodimus Prime, you've tricked my Decepticons into attacking me now. No chance. So he just runs off. And Shockwave says, well, you Dinobots better get out of here, because next time we'll destroy you and stuff like that. There we go. Us Decepticons will emerge triumphant. And so here we go. Another Grimgrams, an advert for the Stars Air and more Action Force, just all the way through. And then the next issue, we return to the Ultra Magnus and Optimus Prime on Cybertron. Okay, so that was issue number 102. Move quickly on to issue 103. Here we go, with Prime and Magnus side by side on Cybertron. Here we go, nice little advert there, and an advert for Transformers Movie, soundtrack album winners. And here we have a Decepticon fuel yard with Octane about to smash up some lowly worker. But of course, Prime and Magnus attack. This does remind me of a story that was in, I think, in the later issues in the US run, where the Pretenders, I think it was the classic Pretenders, are doing the same sort of thing as this storyline, really. Sort of like boosting morale of all the downtrodden Autobot troops on Cybertron. As you can see, he's just sort of like telling the story to the current Decepticon leader, which is Straxus, who's preparing something up here. As you can see, he's just sort of there and blah, blah, blah. He's not happy that Megatron has returned, so he says, summon Megatron, because he's got a little surprise. Meanwhile, the Autobots are loving having Optimus Prime back, but he says he must get back to Earth to aid the Earthbound Autobots. The Autobots turn up at the Ark and tell the Autobots there that Galvatron returned, and now they can't believe it, but they say Optimus Prime is dead. And then Straxus says, blah, 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 you better not be wary of me, Megatron. But he says, what are you going to do in there? He goes, one day I'll just rip through that bubble thing and crush his head. But then he's already prepared something, and he launches this sort of like ray at him, trying to transfer his consciousness into Megatron. And it sort of works eventually. And he says he'll never surrender his mind to Straxus. And eventually we'll see, there we go, Megatron rips through the bubble, crushes his head, and destroys him. And he says, Lord Straxus, is that you in there? Fear not, my loyal Decepticons. Megatron is dead, and Lord Straxus lives on in his place. So Lord Straxus now inhabits Megatron's body. And now we've got Key to Vector Sigma videos to be won. And now the Inhumanoids. I love the Inhumanoids. I really love this. Unfortunately, they stopped it. I'll never understand why, but I managed to get them now. And you can get it on video, actually, all this story. It's exactly the same, which is really good. Little plug there for that. Then the next issue, and then more Robo-Capers. And the Thundercats there. Now then the concluding part, of Optimus Prime and Megatron's return to Cybertron. Here with a nice little cover there. Resurrection. The Autobots are having like a gravestone erected for the Optimus Prime, who they believe is dead at the moment. And so there we go. They're just telling what's happened before for any new readers. And he says, I want Megatron's head. And so he just tells them what's been going on. Megatron, well, Lord Straxus seems to be a bit, I don't know, what's the word, delusional, not sure what's happening. And he says, Lord Straxus are on attack. And he says, oh, what, Rat-Bat? Blah, blah, blah. He says, yes, do this. And then he says, and then basically the Ascender says, and are there any more other orders, Megatron? And he says, no, just do it. And so he doesn't really know who he is at the moment. And he says, I understand all too well. And so Optimus Prime and Ultra Magnus attack Megatron. And when Megatron uses his little known sort of like ability to lock into a black hole, probably the only first or the second time he's ever used it in the comics. And then it causes everything, and the space bridge materialises inside Decepticon headquarters, causing all three of them to disappear. Now then, the Predacons have just returned to Cybertron, mainly because Shockwave wants Megatron dead. And unfortunately, Megatron has just turned back up, but now in a complete state of amnesia. Back as Megatron, though. Lord Straxus seems to have failed for the moment to gain control of that body. And Shockwave says, well, it's a bit of a reprieve until next time. Then suddenly at Optimus Prime's gravestone, Optimus Prime turns up and they say, wow, but Ultra Magnus appears, who knows where. He says, well, it's a chance for me to sort of like discover the Earth. And then there's an advert here for Battle Beast. I love a Battle Beast, of course, part of the Transformers universe in Japan. Nice advert there for Action Force. And of course, then next week it is Deadlocked, back with the US strip, which features the end of Optimus Prime, I believe. So here we are with issue number 105. Deadlock. Not the greatest story, if I'm honest. Yeah, this is a two-parter because obviously the US strip was split into two parts. We've got some interplanetary greetings from Captain Rick, which is a serial, I believe. And this is just called After Death. Basically, Optimus Prime and Megatron want this, some sort of thing at this place, like a computer place. And Optimus Prime just sort of like eventually says, at the end here, because it's a pretty boring, really. But he turns up the Combaticons and that, and they say, well, here's a chance to fight without destroying the place in his computer world. So they agree, but then Megatron says the loser must be destroyed. Optimus Prime agrees. So they all hook themselves up to these little things, allowing this Earthman, Ethan Zachary, I believe, to well, be able to blow them up, whoever loses. And here they are in this world. I can't remember what it's called now, Auto World or something like that. A bit strange, but I wasn't never too keen on this storyline at all, really. Continue with the Inhumanoids, brilliant strip, loved it. Yes, there we go. Then you'll see the final battle. Absolute, a terrible way to get rid of Optimus Prime, if you want my opinion. So here we go with issue number 106, March 1987. Still 32 pence. So all the Autobots now and Megatron and his Combaticons fight in this world. As usual, the Protectobots always take out the Combaticons, while saving all the well, illusional inhabitants of this world. Until it comes down to Optimus Prime and Megatron. But Megatron's found a way to cheat, because I believe Vortex overheard a way to get into a back door for this program. So Defensor attacks Megatron. They both fall to their death, but he uses his password After Death to reappear anywhere in the computer-generated world. He appears behind Optimus Prime. He blasts him, but then Optimus Prime kills Megatron, but also kills a load of the inhabitants and wins. And they say, well, kill Megatron then, because he won. But Optimus Prime says, no, because I killed innocent beings in the process, so I lost. Complete bollocks, if you ask me. But, well, the Earthman does it and blows up Optimus Prime, but manages to save all his personality on a floppy disk. I don't think that would actually happen, if you ask me. But there we go. Right, so that was the end of this issue. Just more Grimgrams. And Inhumanoids, like I said, brilliant strip. Not really about robots, though, a bit strange that, but still a great strip. Right, so there we go. That was the end of it, 106. Yeah, so here we are with issue number 107. Here we go, let me just get this straight. This is always a nightmare trying to line this up. This, of course, featured now the end of Megatron. So here we go, we've got a Captain Rick's competition. And now then, this story is called Gone But Not Forgotten. And it's just got Megatron getting weary and growing illusional and starts to believe that maybe Optimus Prime isn't actually dead. And did he really kill him? Because it was only in a computer world, of course. And he says, well, did you see him die? And he goes, yeah, well, neither did I. Or did you crush him with your bare hands, rather? And then he starts saying to Shockwave that he reckons Optimus Prime's alive and starts getting a bit nutty. And Shockwave starts getting concerned, so does Soundwave. And now then, he summons the who is that? The Stunticons, of course. While Shockwave contacts Cybertron and the Predacons again to try and do exactly what he did before in the UK issues. And now then he believes that this truck is Optimus Prime, but he shoots it and realises, of course, it's not. But he realises, well, he says that Optimus Prime will come, and death will come to Optimus Prime. Of course, this is continued next issue. Nice advert there for the special teams. And Captain Rick's Space Adventure, number 3. Oh, can't separate the pages. There we go. Thundercats, new comic from Marvel. Great cartoon. Grimgrams, and of course the Inhumanoids. Can't go wrong with the Inhumanoids. Now then, here we go. And then we just got next week's, of course, with Robocape and the Forgotten Robots of History. Advert of the Battle Beast there, and of course now we continue with issue number 108. Strike 2 Megatron, you're out. Here we go, with the second attempt by the Predacons to try and destroy Megatron. Now then, here we go, we've got Decepticon Dan Busters there, Collected Comics number 5 I believe, which I did show you a long time ago. I can't remember what review this was, probably number 4 or 5, something like that. Yeah, so here we have the Predacons on Cybertron preparing to go across the space bridge to Earth, where they meet up with Shockwave, who gives them their last final orders before they attack Megatron. And again, just as before, Megatron beats them all. And eventually, here we go, you see he rips off half his face, and they all force to combine into, who is it? Predaking, of course, while Shockwave comes along to aid Megatron for some reason. But Megatron says he doesn't need no help and blasts Predaking. Then they discover inside Predaking sort of like a computer disk, which gives the game away that Shockwave hired them. But just as he's saying, he goes, blah, 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 he realises that he saw Ethan Zachary copy Optimus Prime onto disk, and he says, Optimus Prime, he lives. He blasts the space bridge, it disappears, and they all reckon Megatron is dead, where he stays dead in the US comic for about 2 or 3 years, but in the UK strip he turns up in a few weeks. As we'll show you when we get to those comics, probably my next review. No, probably the next one, probably 2 reviews times. So there we go, and that was the end of this story. We'll go on to Grimgrams in Humanoids, and then of course there's the next issue. And this is where I got $4.99 off my mum and sent off my stars. So move into the next issue, which is issue 109, which of course features the first appearance of the Mechanic. And this is where, well, again, where the US strip just gets a bit silly, really. The only thing of note, really, is that the Autobots are trying to repair Optimus Prime. They try for days, but Ratchet can't fix him, so eventually they decide to blast him off into space. Ratchet has sort of like... Anyway, he gets the ump, really. Instead of trying to wait for people to recover normally, he decides to do something about it with the ones he can fix rather than Optimus Prime. So he goes and gets parts for like people like Prowl, who he manages to revive at the end of this story, as you can see. But while he's at a junkyard here, this crook called the Mechanic is there, and eventually has to hide inside Ratchet, who escapes and then is forced, because he's got the police on his tail, he uses some of his weapons, and the Mechanic notices and starts dismantling them, and so he can use them himself. Meanwhile, Ratchet heads back to the Ark, where the Autobots are preparing Optimus Prime's funeral barge. And here we go, we've got more Action Force, nice advert there, and Grimgrams and then Humanoids. There we go, under attack from their own base. So that was issue number 109. Moving on to number 110. And it's sort of like, it just says, under attack from the Ark. Nice little cover, that. And so here we are at the start. Here's the Mechanic using Ratchet's own weapons against him, as you can see. And they blast Optimus Prime off into space, where he stays for a few years until he comes back. And then, obviously, the Mechanic then follows Ratchet back to the Ark. Now then, the Autobots have come up with this sort of like wrench sort of thing that allows, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Anybody can use it, because it's something to do to like weight. So if you've got something weighing £1 million, an ant could pick it up using this special wrench. A bit unbelievable, really, but there we go. And yeah, the Mechanic nicks it as usual, and some of his other weapons. He hits Prowl in the kneecaps there, stopping him cold, and then eventually, I believe, he turns the Ark's own defences on the Autobots before making off with their weapons. And Prowl has to come and save the day, because the Mechanic has a fear of the law, so he runs off with all his weapons. They retreat, get the injured Autobots back, and that's it, really. And we just see in the distance there Optimus Prime's fuel barge in the distance. We have a nice advert for the Battle Beasts. Great little things they were. In Humanoids. And here we go. Just the next issue with featuring the Dinobots. So here we are. With the penultimate issue for this review. And the Autobots want a new leader. Grimlock says, vote for me. So there's some more winners. And introducing Zartan from Action Force. And this issue just features the return of the Dinobots into the Autobots fold, because they've heard about the death of Optimus Prime and believe that they should now lead the Autobots, Grimlock especially. But in the woods are some campers with a little girl. The Dinobots there feed off on some, what's that, a fuel tanker, with the Decepticons now contacting Cybertron. The Decepticons want to strike at the Autobots while they're down without a leader, so they ask for the biggest transformer that they've got. Meanwhile, the Autobots are deciding who should lead them now. Then Grimlock barged in, said it should be him because he is the strongest Autobot, but they say but he lacks compassion and a few other qualities. And then meanwhile, in the woods, the campers with the little girl, she notices the space bridge appear and then this giant dinosaur transformer appear called Trypticon. I so wish this transfer would come out in England at the time, but it didn't. I so wanted it when I was a kid, but now I've got it. I love it. It's one of my best Transformers. So there we go. We just have the next issue with the Dinobots against Trypticon. So we move into that issue now. Number 112. Cover date the 9th of May 1987. Wow, how many years ago was that now? God, 23 years ago. So here we go. Nice cover that with all the Dinobots against Trypticon there. So move on. Zoid's on hold. Yeah, Zoid's monthly comic here. Whatever happened to that? Anyway, so this issue now features Trypticon attacking the Ark. He manages to fire like these destabilizer missiles at the Ark, disabling the Autobots. The Dinobots see this and say, well, let's just watch Trypticon take the Autobots apart. But then Grimlock knows that he really should be doing something about this. So he decides to. He confronts this little girl somewhere. But she isn't afraid of Grimlock. But then this little fella, I think his name's Greasepit, I could be wrong, comes along from Trypticon and kidnaps her. And then Trypticon wants to destroy her because he's never killed a human before. So Grimlock now rushes in to save her. And then all the Dinobots attack Trypticon. And then it's a nice little action scene here with all the Dinobots facing off against him. Is quite good. And the Dinobots don't actually best him, but Ratchet calls him back because he's consumed far too much fuel. And then the Dinobots return to the Ark with the Autobots. And then the Autobots say, we've witnessed your capacity for great compassion and as well as true leadership skills. So they all hail him new leader of the Autobots. And next issue is Wanted Galvatron, Dead or Alive. We've got Grimgrams, an advert for the new Autobot heroes, Retgar and Rodimus Prime, along with a continuation of the Inhumanoids strip. And there we are, time is Back to the Future with Rodimus Prime. And a nice little advert there for the Battle Beasts. So I shall see you all in my next review. This has been Graham. Bye for now.